Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA. That's musical theater, college auditions. Check us out at mtca.com. And today we've got David Hugo and Valerie Clayman Pye from Long Island University Post on the pod. Wow, that was a mouthful. I think it really was a fun conversation, some wide-ranging topics beyond just the school. We talk a bit about brave spaces and some acting process philosophy in there, so I think you'll really enjoy. Also, in lieu of a personal update or upcoming events with MTCA or anything of that sort, I just want to talk a bit about the UArts situation. I spoke briefly about this in my last episode with Corey Cott, but I know not all of our undergrad listeners do listen to all the interviews with our professionals, so I thought I would address it here too. First off, for those who don't know what happened, University of the Arts announced recently out of the blue that due to finances, they would be closing in a matter of days. It was sudden and shocking and really left the college theater community reeling. And I have to start by saying, of course, how much our hearts go out to all of those who are affected, both from the podcast and MTCA as a whole. We know a lot of students and faculty who are deeply affected by this. Our recent podcast guest, Brian Pelding, was just raving about how his daughter had found her dream school in UArts and was about to graduate, and now a few weeks later, this. So it's just awful. And when I say rock the community, it's not just the direct effect on UArts. I think a lot of parents and students are really concerned about, could this happen to us? What would we do if it did, right? How do we prevent it? Especially in light of the recent news of Marymount merging with Northeastern due to its own financial woes. I do a deep dive on this in the takeaway of this very episode, so please stay tuned for that if you're interested in hearing some of my thoughts on how you can look at colleges like stocks and some of the strategic implications of that as you're making this larger investment. And I do talk specifically about some of these financial woes. But before we get into the strategy of it, I do just want to say how beautiful it's been to see people rallying together. Just yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with a number of faculties of all kinds of universities, including some universities, some guests of this very podcast. And that call had the express purpose of how can we all help? And I've seen that energy leading all of these discussions from the jump. A huge shout out, I've already said it, to the wonderful ladies who run the MT Parent page and Pittsburgh Unified Audition. They've all rallied to help organize as much information as humanly possible for the students. And a lot of college faculty have actively worked to get around potential accreditation issues to help admit sophomores, juniors, and even rising seniors as transfers, which is not normal in the standard BFA process. It's not normal that you're able to transfer in at senior year. So that's been really beautiful. There's been a lot of heart and a lot of goodwill going around, not unlike something you might see surrounding a natural disaster, because what happened is really like our version of a natural artistic disaster. And in this kind of competitive college landscape, it is really nice to see the kind of collaboration and rallying together that maybe made us all want to get into this industry in the first place. And I will say, if you as a listener know anyone who is affected and wants help through this, please feel free to have them reach out to us, and we're happy to connect them to resources we know about, as well as offer guidance and coaching help moving forward to any of these students at a 50% discounted rate, which is significantly below cost to us. I'm sending love to all of you, and on a very different note, enjoy this interview with David and Valerie. Well, we are so excited to be joined by David Hugo and Valerie Clayman Pye. David has a BFA from Syracuse University and an MA from LIU. He has a long career on Broadway in shows like Jekyll and Hyde, Into the Woods, a 12-year career with Les Mis, my gosh, and is assistant professor of musical theater and the director of musical theater here at LIU, where Valerie has a PhD in performance practice and an MFA in staging Shakespeare from the University of Exeter, as well as an MFA in acting from Brooklyn College and a BA in theater arts from Stony Brook. Oh my, so many degrees. She's a professional actor, director, voice and speech coach, as well as author, which we may talk about a little bit, and is an assistant professor of theater and the chair of the Theater, Dance, and Arts Management Program at LIU, which is located in Long Island, New York. And I'm saying LIU, but I should be saying LIU Post each time I say this, and we'll chat about that a little bit on the show. They offer degrees, a BA in theater arts, a BFA in theater arts acting, a BFA in theater arts musical theater. We'll talk about some of those degrees as well. David, Valerie, how are you doing? Welcome on the show.
Doing great.
I tried to slim down those bios for you guys, but my God, but just with the degrees and with both of you, it's a lot to these poor people. It's a lot to intake. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journeys, and so maybe we can take it one by one in terms of your journeys to the school. I read just a tiny bit of information about you, but what should we know about you going in before we get into kind of the school itself?
Well, David, why don't you start?
I actually am a graduate of LIU, as you pointed out earlier. That I was, as you pointed out as well, had a long career with Les Mis, and had a family and a daughter, and wanted it to change the course a little bit because the theater is difficult to have a family
Mm-hmm.
and a daughter and to be there at the soccer games and the basketball games and to be a father. And I decided to change courses and go into teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed a master's degree. But at the same time, I wanted to get something different than what I got at Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the monologue to song practice that was taught to me there for musical theater was good, but not enough. So I was looking for a different type of training technique. And when I was doing that, I was looking at all the different schools in the New York area because I wanted to be with my daughter, and just happened to stumble across LIU's acting program because I knew it was an acting style I wanted to put on musical theater.
Mm-hmm.
Not like we put Stanislavski on musical theater. We might put Michael Chekhov on musical theater, which I do as well. But I came across this thing called Suzuki, and the training, and I came out here and watched the beginning levels of it and thought, what is that? It's some weird karate.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make
Painful on the knees. There's a lot of banging. What's
a lot of
happening with this?
playing, a
Yeah.
lot of,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't make sense to me as an acting training until the head of the acting program asked me to see her advanced, and she had taken the work and created these physical compositions that she was doing heightened text with. They were doing Shakespeare and the Greeks, and I was like, oh my God, these are undergrads, and they're doing things that I can't do, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
Broadway career.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized then that a physical approach to musical theater might be a new way in. And that's when I started. I came here to train, and I took on this style, developed it for musical theater because they didn't have a musical theater program here. They said they had one, but they didn't have. They had like 2 students a year.
Uh-huh.
That
Yep.
they said, that whole thing of, hey, come do musical theater here. We have an acting program. You can, we
Right.
don't
We'll
really
sing a little bit. Yeah.
theater, but
Yep.
you'll be able to do it later on. And I was about ready to leave and hopefully take this training somewhere else, and they asked me to start this program. So
Mm-hmm.
I ran into a pot of gold. And we've grown from a very small program to a very big program in a very
Yep.
short period of time, and have a lot of students that are working on Broadway, which I think is a true test of a program actually having the goods.
Yep.
So,
It's
yeah.
very rare that I hear someone in the theater describe their good fortune as a pot of gold. Normally, it's like artistic gold, but there's not normally a lot of literal gold involved. I hope LIU is paying well, so it's good to
Well,
hear.
I'm Irish. No, I'm
Yeah.
not Irish.
Valerie, what about you? Give me either fun facts or previously on, or what the journey, whatever you want to give us in terms of. I mean, you must have started getting these degrees at 7 years old to be as
Yes,
young looking as you
yes,
are to have all these
exactly. I'm
degrees,
a
of course.
child
But
prodigy.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I did my undergraduate work in at Stony Brook in theater arts, and when I graduated, I began working primarily in TYA, Theater for Young Audiences. And like many actors in the New York area, I had quite a fun contract with TheaterWorks USA, and I was out on the road. And I was working in New York in a variety of capacities, but I was always, my specialty is training actors for Shakespeare. But yeah, what I've come to realize in that is that yes, it's for Shakespeare, but it's actually for so much more than just Shakespeare. But uh, part of that kind of origin story is that I was always terrified of Shakespeare, terrified of it. And I was working, as I said, in TYA, but also in new play development. So I had, the amazing good fortune to work alongside, playwrights like Reginald Rose of 12 Angry Men. But I had this thing about Shakespeare that I was always afraid of. And because I really didn't know how to approach it or how to bring myself to it, or it just intimidated me beyond words. And so I realized, well, this is kind of foolish. I have to stop going into the equity calls with half an apology about my classical pieces
Mm-hmm.
and figure out what I'm doing. So I went to London, to the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, to Lambda, and trained there as an actor. And I was there the summer after Shakespeare's Globe, the replica of Shakespeare's Globe, opened. And I went there, and I call it my lightning bolt moment. It was as if I had been struck by lightning, because I suddenly understood Shakespeare in a way that I never had before. And primarily because, Shakespeare was writing for theater that happened in a one-room space, but all of Stanislavski training happens in a two-room space, right? With the audience in one location and the actors in another. And so I began to realize that I really wanted to um, figure out what we could learn from that space. And basically, what happened was I came back to New York. I had had this big epiphany. I started doing nothing but Shakespeare. And a lot of actors in New York were saying, hey, you've had this experience being over in London. Can you coach me? And I was coaching a lot of actors who were doing really well. And I realized, ooh, this is what I really want to do for the rest of my life. And so I went to Brooklyn College and got my MFA in acting, which was an extraordinary experience. And that program was really a hidden gem. But I realized while I was there that there were a lot of acting teachers, and I really wanted to specialize in Shakespeare. So that was when I moved back to the UK, and then what that led to was a grant that I had from the British government to study the performance conditions of Shakespeare's Globe and to create an actor training methodology based on those conditions. And so that became my life's work, and what ultimately led me back to the States and brought me to LIU.
I love
So
it. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about authorship. And so this, you've described two things. It seems like you've authored both on Shakespeare and kind of acting pedagogy. So maybe we'll get into that a little bit
yeah.
later. But I want to dive into LIU a bit, and LIU Post, and just kind of hear a little bit of your overview. Dave was talking about a little bit of the beginning of the program and the impetus behind it. But now, if I'm a student learning about and approaching it now, what do you think it means to be an LIU Post student? And maybe especially how that distinguishes you from other training programs, from other potential BFAs I could look at. What makes an LIU Post student different?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I don't know the other programs that well, so I'd hate to say the word different. But I guess I'll say what we really put our focus on.
Mm-hmm.
And our focus is on making sure that students that come to our program have a repeatable practice that they can put to any work out there, whether it be musical theater, Shakespeare, contemporary drama, that they have an approach, that they're not just getting a tool bag. Like when I got it in college back in the day, and I'm not putting down Syracuse. I don't know where they are now or whatever, but it's just what we did back in the day. Was this tool bag approach? A little of this, little of that, little of this, and we were all complaining about what do we do with that? That I could sit in a chair and do sense memory and taste orange juice all day and repeat that, and what is that doing for me? So we're very big about process and a repeatable process that students can take away, and with any side they get, they can prepare. I was paying lots of money to have people work with sides for me, and I don't think that is proper. We're not going to direct them and coach them. We're giving them a process. There's a difference between a coach and a director when it comes to working on work. I want to make sure that the students that leave my class can teach my course when I'm done and teach it well. And to me, that's the thing that really sets us out. And I know that's a fact because our students go to do, other work, and they come back to me and they say, oh my God, the other students aren't doing these things. And we're like, yeah, I know. It's not just to memorize and wing it. There's more to acting than that. And to me, I think that's why our musical theater students are doing Texas Shakespeare, Virginia Shakespeare, because of the work they get from Val and Shakespeare. They're going out in devising pieces and creating, like, they can do anything. And we're not a one-trick pony. You're only doing musical theater.
Mm.
I don't believe in that anymore. I
Yep.
don't believe that that's the way the program should be.
Yep.
Just dancing and singing and getting some acting. We're deep acting.
Yeah.
Yep. Valerie, anything you want to add there, please?
Oh, I was going to say, just to add to that, I think one of the big things for us too is that we, in addition to having this repeatable, reliable, consent forward and trauma informed practice, one of the big things too is that we offer a really clearly embodied practice that synthesizes body, voice, and text. And I think our faculty is really working very closely together. And we're all process geeks ourselves.
Yeah.
And so, we're always strategizing how to create more and more synergy between what we teach in order to maximize how students grow and what they get out of the program. So I think that's a really big thing for us too, is that, that students, we take a lot of pride in the fact that when our students graduate, they feel really equipped to tackle a whole variety of things because we really focus on tools rather than coaching.
I love it. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into the curriculum. So I'm going to ask you a couple curricular questions too. But before we move past the sort of like culture part of it, like I would just love to hear, like, what is your experience when describing, other than now they're going to have this process, or they'll be maybe a little bit more specific in their process graduating. But when you talk about the students, so often our students, when they're making their final decisions, which happened recently, in some ways is still happening here in May as we're in the long year of 2024. But as they're starting to make the decision, often they'll talk about sort of the vibes of it, of like, what are the vibes of what is an LIU student like, especially an MT acting student, who are they as kind of people, and again, it doesn't have to be fully in contradistinction to other programs, but just as human beings, who are the LIU post students and what are they like?
Yeah, I think they're really good people. They are really good people. I think they're competitive in the best ways, in that they hold each other accountable, but not competitive in a kind of stab you in the back, backbiting kind of, clawing your way to the top where people have to be afraid to take risks. I think one of the big things for us is that we ask our students, we work really hard to create brave spaces where students feel empowered to fail forward and really to take risks and not worry about kind of gossip and things that happen once they step out of class. So I think they're very generous. I think they're really curious. I think that they're really passionate.
Playful.
What's that? Playful? Yeah, I think they're just great people. I think our students really make the program. I think they're very generous, even with prospective students too.
They take care of one another. And I think that, and I'll say time and time again to them that, the greats that I've worked with, I understudied Terrence Mann, and he asked me, what night do you want to go on tonight? That type of a person, Sutton Foster, Kelly O'Hara, these people that, just, they give the shirt off their back. They're not egomaniacs. They just trust in their talent and they take care of you, and that's the type of student we look for. And it's the type of student that I think really is succeeding here. And they police each other. I love it too. When the freshmen come in, sometimes you'll get a few little egos and whatever happening, and the upperclassmen will literally take them aside and say, no, that isn't happening here. That might have happened in your high school, but that's not happening here, which is really amazing.
Let's talk a little bit about the curriculum. So you mentioned sort of acting focus. I love hearing that is, of the three disciplines, it seems like that's where you put the most of your focus, but I want to hear about kind of all three and the specifics of, especially for the musical theater. What does it look like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year in terms of what I'm getting in those three disciplines? And then we'll talk acting too for the acting students.
Yeah. So in the first year, the students are really going to have a Stanislavski-based approach. So we're really looking to get everyone on the same page in terms of vocabulary and skill set, but based in Stanislavski, right? So they're working on objectives, obstacles, tactics. And in the first year, they're also going to take, an intro to drama class where they're going to receive their play analysis skills and things like that. Along with basic acting, they'll have a technical theater class class and possibly what we call contract, which is where they get hands-on practical experience working in costumes, lighting, and set construction. In addition to whatever core classes they might need, a dance class, a one-on-one voice class, of course. In the sophomore year, and that kind of carries through our whole freshman year, building on those kind of, that Stanislavski foundation. And then in the sophomore year, the students are beginning with their musical theater class, which David can talk a little bit more about that.
We forgot one thing though. They get basic Suzuki in the
in spring semester.
semester.
They get base. Thank you for that.
So that's where the physical and the psychological approaches are starting to
come together. Yes.
Go ahead.
And then in the sophomore year, intermediate acting, they're beginning with some more viewpoints work, also looking at material that is probably a little bit less closely aligned with their own identities. So in the first year, they're working on really contemporary work that is close to them in age, close to them in experience, characters that they could really step out and play right now. Whereas in the sophomore year, they're beginning to kind of stretch their imaginations a little bit more. They're going to add some more physical skills into what they are doing with that approach. In addition, David can talk about the musical theater class. They're taking voice and speech for the entire year. So really beginning to, work on all areas of resonance. This is voice and speech from a speaking perspective rather than, singing, which happens all 8 semesters. They are beginning to work on some theater history, classical theater history, then modern theater history, more dance classes, and more voice lessons every semester, dance classes every semester, and then in the junior year, things kind of splinter a bit in that we look at that as a pivot point. Students have been with us for 2 years. They've got 2 years to go. And we're really looking at how to maximize their own personal growth in the time that they have with us. So in the junior year, the advanced acting sequences, we have the opportunity for students to do a deep dive in one of 2 areas. And both of those, what we call tracks, both of those tracks are focused on a synthesis between body, voice, and text. They both rely heavily on viewpoints and Laban. But the physical text analysis track, which is one leg that they can go down, also revisits the Suzuki work. Mm-hmm. And then there is a Shakespeare track that I head that introduces elliptical energy training, which is like a 3-dimensional kinesthetic awareness that helps to position the body in space, in addition to working with a variety of techniques for heightened text. And that's an entire year, in addition to another course in theater history, musical theater, dance, voice lessons, core classes.
And when we say those musical theater classes in the sophomore and the junior year, those are your acting the song classes. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 sides to that as well, to both of those. One is more of a Stanislavski original, what I got at Syracuse. And the other side is a physical approach, which is your Suzuki composition work I've been talking about. And all the students
which is David's original work.
Will get both sides. Right. And that happens both in the sophomore and the junior year.
Mm-hmm. And one of the exciting things is, having been through the Suzuki training and had the experience on both ends, what David has done in terms of, pairing this physical training with musical theater training helps students to really release the voice into play action while they're singing, as opposed to, having that more kind of traditional objective-based approach.
Well, let me pause you before we get to senior year, because I want to talk a little bit about senior year and maybe into the launch of the business too. But I also want to clarify. I think I've been tracking it well enough, hopefully. But can we just talk about the interplay between the acting students and the musical theater students? Even you guys offer a BFA in theater arts, but then with the focuses, it looks like, or whatever goes in parentheses of acting and musical theater, how do those disciplines interact with each other. If I'm someone who I think I really want to focus on acting, like me, I'm a very good singer, but I'm not really a dancer. I don't think I'm a musical theater person. I like the idea of, I wouldn't be mad at being in a musical. I wouldn't be mad at a voice lesson. How does that interact in terms of what I'm doing as an actor that's musical theater? And then I think you mentioned already a little some of what I'm doing as an actor if I am a musical theater student. But how do those sort of programs if sort of interact with each other?
Yeah, they're absolutely entwined. So, one of the big strengths of our program is that we train as an ensemble. And so, students are not siloed according to discipline. So, in our acting classes, you'll have all of the BFA actors and the acting majors and the BFA musical theater majors completely intertwined, right? There's
But
no.
not the BA theater majors potentially.
The BA in the first year. But the degree requirements for the BA are different than those of
Yep.
the BFA acting and the BFA musical theater.
Yep.
What's different between, and we really encourage a lot of synergy and synthesis between those. So our acting majors can take voice lessons, and our
take musical theater sometimes.
or they could take,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and our musical theater BFAs can also take, for example, acting for film and TV as an elective. So there are a couple of different degree requirements that are different, but in terms of being in class, all the students are in class together, and the musical theater majors are auditioning for all the plays, and acting majors may audition for and do audition for the musicals. And so it's really about helping each individual student develop to the best of their own ability, as opposed to, some other places where if you are this degree, you only get this type of class. And if you are that degree, you only get this type.
We're big about creating the performer. I believe you've got to be able to do everything now. In our acting majors will find ways to do more than our musical theater majors will find ways to be composers. They'll find ways, like they'll take advantage of all the opportunities that they can possibly get, directing, choreography. I think more is more now.
So true. Okay, now I'll continue on. So I want to hear about the senior year, and then especially kind of the focus of how are your students kind of launching into the business. So how do I, what's that mean in terms of interaction with agents and managers and casting directors, and how I'm going to make my way into, I assume many go to New York City, though we can talk about other places they may end up, but how do I sort of make my way into the industry itself from LIU?
So the senior year is really, it's very forward facing, as you mentioned, in that students are in the fall semester, they are really beginning to understand where they are preparing to launch. So they're working on audition skills, they're working on developing their personal brand, they're working on creating things like their own marketing materials, their websites, and things like that. Our colleague Eric Jordan Young is doing an extraordinary job with our seniors. And then that fall semester begins to help develop what will then go into the senior showcase. And so obviously the senior showcase happens in the spring of senior year. We have an in-person component as well as a virtual component. And they're all, professionally shot and edited. Students get a clip of those that then live in perpetuity on their own websites while it remains relevant to them. And then they also are, we work with a company called The Growing Studio, and the virtual component gets shared in a variety, basically all of the major markets. So in addition to having the in-person showcase in New York City, then their virtual showcase is also launched to markets like LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, New York, obviously, and all of the major markets in the U.S. And in addition to having it reach things like who's casting the cruise ships and resorts and things like that. And so our students have had a lot of success, both with industry interests, but also with getting some work after graduation.
Yeah, David, anything you want to throw in terms of sort of the launch of the business of it all?
Well, I think that the one thing that we've got going right now, if you heard me recruit, you'll hear me say that I would love to say if you got into Michigan, Syracuse, Cincinnati Conservatory, or Boston Conservatory that you should come here. But
Or Carnegie Mellon? I mean, can we?
Carnegie Mellon. I said Carnegie Mellon did. I hope
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, the
I hope I
podcast
said
host
Carnegie
over here
Mellon.
is
I
feeling a little.
usually start with the word Carnegie
Oh, thank
Mellon,
you,
which
thank
I
you.
think
Okay,
is,
now
in my
continue.
opinion, the top program in the
Oh, there
country.
we go. Now I have my
I
ego
really say
soothed.
that.
Thank you, David.
But those top five, in my opinion, I think that our training, if you saw the people that are teaching here and what they can do, I think our training is as good. I think the issue is that those showcases have been around a lot longer,
Hmm.
and they are strong. You're going to have that opportunity as soon as you leave college. That's why I'll say, don't even talk to me if you've got into one of those. But if you didn't get into one of those, then our showcase is growing, and it's because of Eric Jordan Young, who
Hmm.
we brought in 3 years ago. And Eric Jordan Young, if you look him up, Ragtime, just did it with Kelly and Brian Stokes Mitchell, like the one that's going in the
Hmm.
theaters,
Hmm.
right? He's current. And I think it's important that you have somebody who's current running your showcase, somebody who has the connections, also knows what's happening in the business and can teach from that. What the person we had at Syracuse when I was there was so old, they had no idea what was going on in
Hmm.
New York. Why in the world were they running showcase?
Hmm.
I would love to be able to say I could run showcase, but I've been out of the business for 12 years.
Hmm.
Bells are ringing was the way I got my my to find out if I got that call back.
Yeah.
I should not be running the
Yeah.
showcase. So it's just a big thing for us that I think that Eric we've already moved up about 30% of students getting connections to agents
Yep.
this year. As we look at our percentages from when he first started,
Yep.
and I'm hoping that will continue to grow because that is what will put us really on the map here at LIU.
It's so true. I really like that. It's a conversation we had a lot on this podcast of like, you're not going to be able to sort of counter the years of establishment of some schools, but in some ways, being forced to be more innovative is a blessing to some of these programs. And I could speak from having gone to one of those, and it was not an innovative showcase. It didn't have to be. They didn't. They felt a little bit like, whatever. The people will come. We don't have to really do much. And I do think we're seeing now, like, some of the innovation is helping stocks rise and stocks fall, and
COVID helped everybody.
Yeah.
COVID
COVID
really
helped
is
everybody.
a reset in a lot of ways for people who are
Yep.
a
Yeah.
new world. I'd love to talk a little bit about just sort of outside of the theater program. What do I need to know about LIU in terms of what my experience is outside of the theater program from campus perspective, from a broader university offerings, and then also I'd love to talk a little bit academically of like for students who go, I might be interested in a minor, I might be interested in a double major, or other academic parts of the school. What should I know about LIU going in?
Well, I think that we're not. I'm going to go with what we're not. We're not like a Penn State or a Syracuse that's going to have the fraternity sorority scene. Walk down to the bar scene and whatever. We really are in a. There's a lot of like mansions and stuff around us. We're just a beautiful campus. It's the old Post Estate. And the president of the university has done a great job of creating a life on campus that the students can go. We're now Division I all the way across the campus, so you can go to a Division I football game, and they have events where in the gym, big dances and things like that. And we do have sororities and fraternities. They're clubs. They're clubs, but not the house, not Animal
Right.
House houses. But
That's what most of our students are looking for, is an Animal House
yeah,
experience. David. You really got
exactly.
it right on. That's what
Isn't
they
that
want.
funny,
That's what
though? It's
they
a great one to ask. Is always no, that's not what I'm looking
and they
for.
have no idea. I
You
bet
know,
most of our students have never heard of Animal House, but yeah.
our sorority fraternity really is just our department. Do you know what I mean? Everybody, our department is so close, and they all hang out, and they do. The students will get an apartment, off campus, and the students will go hang out there and have their parties and the things that college students do.
Yep.
Um, but it's not. Yeah, it's not the Syracuse type feel, but it's a
Right.
it's a very, very pretty campus and a very there's a lot of social events, like I said.
Well, one thing I think that's worth mentioning is that we're about 30 miles outside of New York City.
Yes,
Hmm.
So,
that's huge.
it really gives some students don't want an urban experience, right?
Hmm.
If you're interested in an urban experience, we have a campus for that too, right?
Hmm.
But this campus and our program is not an urban uh, based program.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get the best of both worlds because we're only 30 miles outside of New York City. So you can take a bus to the train, and in 45 minutes, you are in downtown Manhattan. So
Mm-hmm.
students will go in and they may do some master classes. We often have comps that are shared with our students to go and see shows and things
Yep.
like that. And even if that's not the case, they do student rush tickets and things like that. We have alumni who are in a variety of shows that might be running off Broadway, or sometimes even current
Sometimes
students
current
who
students.
are in shows that are running,
Right.
in New York. And so it's very easy to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we have this kind of quintessential college campus, right? Where, you don't need a car to be here on campus. If you're living here on campus, it's basically like a 7-minute walk to class.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely beautiful. As David was mentioning, it's the former summer estate of the Post family of Post cereals, so Fruity Pebbles and all of that. And it is the Gold Coast of Long Island, so it's a really gorgeous place to be. But like you were saying, it's not one of those schools that has like a walk to downtown with a bar scene and things like that. That's not who
Mm-hmm.
we are. That's
Mm-hmm.
not, you're not going to find that here. But one of the great things is that it does allow students to have that college campus experience while still being close to New York.
And our students are always going in and auditioning.
Oh yeah.
And they're always getting work around here too. So we had
It's a big Long Island theater scene too.
student in Stranger Sings, in the city.
Well,
Mhm.
and how does that work? That was one of my questions was, LIU may not be the temptation of a Marymount or, you're not right there, in terms of the agents and managers go in for this commercial. It's right down the block or whatever. But I imagine many of your students do audition. How is that encouraged or discouraged? Like if I book something, am I able to kind of get credit for it? How does it work in terms of, do I take a semester off if I do end up doing something? Is that discouraged? How does that work within the sort of the faculty?
We had two students their junior year, different times, get the national tour of Cinderella. And both of them, took a hiatus
Yep.
and went up. And then I think the beautiful thing is they came back and
Yep.
finished their degrees. And
Yep.
then, like I said, the student that just did
Mhm.
Stranger Things, you know, uh, we changed his classes around and made it
You
possible
made it
for
work.
them
Yeah.
to go in and do that
Yeah.
because we knew the credit was worth it, And then we also have some regional theaters like the Argyle in Gateway and
Mhm.
stuff, and our students are auditioning there, and they are
Mhm.
currently working there.
Yeah.
So
So it's allowed. You'll try to make it work with them. It's not
maybe,
We
discouraged
do.
yeah,
to do it.
We
Yeah.
do. And it's not a one size fits all answer because it depends on the circumstances. It depends
Of
on,
course.
sometimes it's just a short shoot, which
Right.
yeah,
means that they're missing
Miss
a
a
class.
class and
So, and that's
yeah,
one thing. And then another is a tour, which is another whole thing.
yeah.
But we definitely encourage that, particularly for, in the summer and things like that. We have a lot of students who work in summer stock and regionally. And, obviously it's an embodied practice. So we expect you to be present in class.
Yep.
But for these big things, where, the faculty is going to support students
Yep.
in terms of saying, yeah, you should go to that callback because this is an important credit for you.
Totally. One thing I don't think we talked about much was the academics of it all. So, what if I'm interested in things beyond theater? Obviously, if I'm getting a BFA, this is my focus. But if I want a minor, how does that work in terms of other academics at LIU?
Unfortunately, LIU doesn't offer minors. So you wouldn't be able to minor if you were here. And, in terms of having a double major, the BFA in musical theater is 87 credits out of
Mhm.
120. So it's really intense. We run a conservatory style program within a liberal arts university. It's not impossible. Sometimes it depends on, how many IB or AP credits students may have transferring in, which lightens the demands on the core curriculum, which opens up some spots for students to take other, uh, degrees. Usually, when we know in advance that a student wants to do something like have a double major, we'll encourage them to sit down with the plans of study for both programs
Mhm.
right at the top to really be strategic about what they're going to take when. So that's one way to kind of answer that question. It may also mean that, given the demands, because it is a really demanding program. So it may mean that students may not finish within 8 semesters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Some students may take summer classes, but then you also have to weigh the fact that if you're taking summer classes, you're not in summer stock. So, it might mean extending by a semester or so. Uh, you know, it's it can be done, but it can be difficult.
Yep.
Having said that about minors, what I will say is that students can take classes outside of the major in areas that interest them, even if they don't receive an actual minor. So, students who are interested in film, we've got students who are taking classes in the film department. We have students who, are interested in business. They may take some classes in the business school and things like that. So, it can be done, but it requires some forethought and some planning.
Yep. Well, and that leads me perfectly maybe into the, I wanted to just distinguish between the LIUs. I'm casually using LIU to mean you guys, but we have LIU Post, and then what is it? A couple years ago, that LIU Brooklyn, where they started there, it was it's a film-ish film degree. It's film acting and something. Some more words
Acting
to
for
it than the
film and TV.
acting for film and TV. That sounds like a more cogent way of saying that than whatever I was saying. But so how are you guys linked or not linked? If I was someone who wanted to, you've mentioned the urban experience. If I wanted to do things at Brooklyn, is there a movement between the two schools, or are they two very separate entities?
At the moment, they are two very different entities. And so at the moment, students who are in the program at Brooklyn don't cross over with the students at Post and vice versa. The students in the Brooklyn program are, as we said, in an urban setting. They are working and taking their classes with the new group, which is the partnership that the Brooklyn campus has
Mm-hmm.
with the new group in the city, and they're taking their classes there. This is something that it will be interesting to see, because right now there's a trajectory of aligning both campuses into
Uh-huh.
one cohesive one LIU. This podcast in a couple of years may be out of date, but at the moment they are two
First
distinct.
thought, Valerie, please, out of date. Our podcast? My God. We'll
Well,
have to
my
update
response
it.
may be out of
We'll
date.
have to
You
bring
will
you back
never
on.
be out of date.
Thank you. No,
You
that's.
will never be out of date, but we'll have to have a follow-up interview.
But there's some discussion toward potentially unifying. But of course, right now it seems like
Of
more of a
course, we're doing
competitive
that.
energy. It feels like you guys
Yeah.
are pulling from each other. It's which lion will run the herd is sort of what
Yeah.
I'm getting from it.
Yeah. So the faculty are different. The degree requirements are different. The classes are different. So right now, if you are in the BFA acting for film and TV, you're taking all of your classes there. And if you're in the either BFA acting program, BA theater arts program, or BFA in musical theater, you are exclusively taking classes on the Post campus.
I love it. Can we talk a little bit about cost? So we've looked up some basic numbers of tuition. Our crack research team has about $40,000 as the sticker price for undergraduate tuition, and then there's other expenses that go along with that. How does that work in terms of what most of our students would expect to pay? From a perspective of academic scholarships, talent scholarships, need scholarships. Where do you find that most people, as they're actually signing on the dotted line, where are they paying, or how do scholarships work for you guys?
Well, I think, the majority of our scholarships come from academic scholarships. Those are merit based. And I think, that we're quite generous in that regard. My experience, particularly my experience as not only as chair of the department, but as the parent of a college age student, I think is quite generous. We do have a small number of talent scholarships that students are ranked for at the time of their auditions with us.
Mm-hmm.
But those are, I would say, are more of a gesture or the icing on the cake of the academic
Mm-hmm.
scholarship. They're much smaller in scale. Uh, what else were we talking about? I just lost my thought.
Scholarships, anything in the world of how I can get maximum money from you,
We are test optional. At the moment, I know these things are changing from year to year. At the moment, we're test optional, but you will maximize your ability to rank higher in the academic scholarship with test scores.
Yep.
So I know that, the maximum amounts, which go all the way up to full tuition, if you are a recipient of the presidential scholarship, those are those scholarships are enhanced by having
Good test scores.
recorded test
Yep.
scores. Yeah.
Totally makes sense. All right. I want to give you a chance, David, to give that pitch that you give. Here we are in recruiting season. So, people here, we're about to sign on the dotted line. I'm not. I've got 6 good options. None of them are the 5 schools you mentioned potentially, but you're sitting there and going, here's why it should be us as opposed to another school. What do you say? What's the positive version of that pitch?
I go right back to the repeatable process every time. And I tell the students, do yourself a favor before you make the choice. Find students from all the programs you're looking at and ask them the simple question: how do you approach a scene? How do you approach a monologue? How do you approach a song? Ask an LIU student and ask any student out there, and I guarantee you're going to get a very, very deep dive from our students. And if you're not getting it from the other schools, don't go there. Go to the school that is going to be very articulate in the answer. And that seems to be, it has worked for years. And I tell them to find as many students as they can. Ask a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, because you're going to get also a different answer per the year. But I think that's, because that's what we are. We're training first here. That's the way we look at it. We're not looking at how many damn shows you can do. We're not looking, even though we do 30 some shows a year with our clubs and everything else. But we are about training, and I think training gets you there. And I think that's why and I can say we've had a student in Hadestown, Be More Chill, Dear Evan Hansen, 2 in Kinky Boots, 2 in Cinderella, 1 on Mamma Mia right now, The Grinch, and
King Kong.
And we've only got King Kong, original King Kong. There's a bunch, there's more, but that's only 5 years. 5 years. She keeps going.
Keep naming schools. I mean, how long is this list going to get?
Right, but we've only got 5 graduating classes. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good deal.
Darn good. Yep. Totally.
Take a risk on somebody new.
I love it. All right, we'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a flash with a little more on the audition process. So we'll be back. Okay, we are back with David, Hugo, and Valerie Clayman Pye. We're going to talk a little bit about the audition and admission process of things. I know we got a little bit into that already on the first half, but I would love to just hear from as you're looking at these auditions, when you mentioned some of those things about what kind of students you think flourish at your program, in terms of culturally, that kind of stuff. What are you sniffing for that makes you say, this feels like an LIU post student? So what are you looking for in terms of talent, in terms of personality? What makes you go, this is a yes? And then maybe especially for our A+ students who go, this is a yes with the maximum scholarship, or this is the person I really want. What are you looking for as you look in those auditions?
First and foremost, a good person, because all it takes is one bad student to ruin a whole class. I mean, it's as simple as that. I think that a lot of it's very important in the room and to be able to cultivate every student to have an opportunity of doing great work and growing. They're all going to grow at different paces and at different moments, so that's first and foremost. And we have really some crazy ways of looking at that, even outside the door.
Yeah, how do you test it? Are you giving like ethical tests of there's train tracks and do you pull the lever and kill 3 people to save 1 person, or how are you testing out for that good person?
Well, we have students most of the time. If you come to Unified, you'll notice we have students outside the door, and they're talking to students. And every so often, when the student comes in, we'll ask, "Would you want to work with that person?" Simple as that.
Yep.
The students are auditioning them outside, and we ask questions inside the room.
In the bar of the Palmer House, you guys are down there just checking things out, looking at parents, stuff like that.
Yep, checking.
Smart.
Parents can end it real quick too.
Believe me, I know. Believe me, I know that.
Real quick.
Yep.
Apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Unfair sometimes, but true. But what about, so it totally makes sense in terms of what you're looking for as a human being. What about from a talent perspective? What are you sniffing for? And is there anything in terms of the order of, I'm really especially looking for strong actors or a really strong voice or strong dance training, or do any of those things matter in different ratios for you guys?
Curiosity and a willingness to take direction and play. That's a big thing for us. If you, we like to try and work with students when it's possible for us to do that, and students who are really rigid and fixed because maybe their coach told them this is the way it needs to go. That's a red flag for us. If you're not willing to play, or you don't have fun playing,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a big red flag for us,
In
because
all three rooms.
yes.
Yep.
In all three rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that mean most students are getting a lot of adjustments from you? Are you seeing the pieces and then saying, let's try it this way, and you're throwing things at them to test how they take those adjustments?
We almost always are
Yeah.
giving adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's one reason why, like at New York Unifieds, we have 3 rooms going.
Mm-hmm.
So we have time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just in and, we want to get to know them. We want them to get to know us,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's always an adjustment,
Yep.
of some sort.
And then is there also an interview portion where maybe you're doing some of that good person checking of going, are you talking to them about themselves as people, themselves as artists? How does that interview portion go for you guys?
We do try and talk with them for sure. Because we're also interested, I think, in students who are really curious, who are curious and trainable. That's what we're really looking is, because we're so focused on teaching a process, we're looking for students who are willing to take the journey.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think that's a big thing, is
meaning you're looking for not being too cooked already. If it feels like I've already got my process, you go, well, we're not going to be able to start from ground zero with you.
No, and you know what? There are schools that are looking for those students. I mean, there are students who come into the audition room who, could walk out and work professionally at this moment. And, they're going to go into certain programs where that, not a whole lot may change from start to finish, right? Whereas I think, we don't put together a class according to type. And so we're not limited in that respect. We're really looking at students who have potential, that can be developed over a 4-year period. And, I think one of the big things that we see and we hear every year, we just had graduation last week, so this is like the perfect time for us to be speaking about it, is that, when students are getting ready to graduate, they can't believe where they are from where they were. And, it's that ability to be surprised by what you can achieve is something we're always looking for. So that's why I think, a lot of it is, is this person willing to take direction and play? But part of it is also having a growth mindset. We really are looking for students who have a growth mindset and are willing to be changed by what they encounter.
I love that.
That's the whole point of an education.
Yep. What about you? You mentioned sort of the SATs and potentially grades for scholarship, and that the SATs would be helpful there. If you like a student artistically, what else and what other interaction do you have with like the academic application? What bars and things do they need to pass in terms of actually being admitted to the university? If you guys go, yes, this person, we love them, they're number one on my presidential scholarship, whatever vote there. How does that work in terms of their essays and their letters of record? Are those things that you're looking at and evaluating as well? Is that only done by the Office of Admission? How does that work for you guys?
That's actually only done by the Office of Admissions. So students have to be admitted to the university before they can be admitted to the program, although they sometimes will audition before they have received their admission.
Right. A walk-in or something at
Right, exactly, exactly. So, the big thing for us is, we're hoping that all students are admitted to the university, but really that vetting happens outside of our purview.
So for you, you're just looking at the artistic side of things, just the audition itself. You're not, reading their essays or this kind of thing.
We work with admissions teams, so admissions is also looking at our rating. We give them a rating, each one of them, and if a student was struggling in school and the rating is high, sometimes they'll talk to us to see if they can just shift a few things or find a way to make it possible for that student to still come here,
Really cool.
which
Yeah.
is nice to have that kind of,
Mm.
walking with the admissions team to
Yep.
help us. Yeah.
I'd love to talk about, you mentioned, and I love that you sort of already volunteered, hey, we're not looking at types, we're not filling our class out by type. How do you sort of consider factors, other than just talent and who they are as a person in terms of, as you're filling out the class, are you thinking about gender balance? Are you thinking about height and size and racial diversity, diversity of ability, geographical balance? Like, how are you thinking about the pool of people that you're putting together, especially in terms of the initial offers? And then, of course, we know in this process, there's a lot of like waitlist movement. So there's this happens, and then who fills in there? Like, how are you considering any of those factors that go beyond just sort of talent and personhood?
Other than trying to have a diverse community, there is no other factor. We don't want to be that program.
No, we don't take
You know,
size or anything into
know,
account. That's irrelevant to us.
and I think it's immoral, in my opinion.
Mm.
So we're basically looking for talent, and we definitely are pushing to have a greater diverse community all the time. But that's not part of the acceptance process in our opinion, and it shouldn't be. Especially where I think Broadway's moving and should have moved many years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want our community to reflect the world at large, and so there, and also recognizing that that there are lots of different forms of diversity, including,
Exactly.
Neurodiversity and, things, the types of diversity that isn't always necessarily apparent is also important to us.
I want to talk a little bit. I didn't ask in the first half about sort of where your students tend to come from and then where they end up. So in terms of geographically, how many come from the Long Island, the New York area? How many come from across the country, across the world? And then also, I guess, where do they end up? Do most end up in New York? Do people end up in other places? How does that go?
Yeah. I would say, I don't have the exact data
I didn't
in front of
expect
me,
that you
but
would,
I
yes.
would say that probably only about 10% of our students come from Long Island. And our students are from all across the United States, although we do have pockets where more students tend to, to come. So, for example, we have a number of students from Florida and from Texas, and
Louisville.
from Kentucky. And so we have some different pockets where we have students kind of more of a kind of flow coming from, but we have students from all over, from the West Coast, from the middle of America, a number of students from the East Coast. But we also have students from, Hawaii, and we have students from Mexico and Puerto Rico and China and Korea. We've got students, international students. We have students,
Canadians too.
Canadian.
Okay, now you're doing, David. She was doing Lion King, and now you're just naming countries. I mean, come on.
This is how we work.
We're very good.
We love to do this together.
Team.
Trust me.
Chicago, and I'm trying to think of musicals that are also places.
Yes,
right.
So yeah, our students are from all over.
Yeah.
And it's really fun sometimes when we have prospective students visiting and we're taking them on a tour, and you walk through the parking lot that's adjacent to our little theater and you look at the license plates and it's like, Texas and Colorado. We have a number of students from Colorado, but Texas and Colorado and Vermont, and it's like you could play the license plate game.
Yeah, you could win it here.
I mean, that part is really fun.
Love it. I want to go back and just ping on something you said at the beginning. You're sort of talking about the culture that you guys are creating. And Valerie, you mentioned the idea of brave spaces, and that sort of being something that you're intentionally setting out. What do you mean by that, if that's something someone's not familiar with that term?
Yeah, well, I think the term brave space is what is replacing safe space, right? That, there was a time where people were saying, oh, this is a safe space, this is a safe space, this is a safe space. But safety is subjective, and no one can guarantee a safe space because we don't know what the lived experience is of every individual who comes in the room. And so we don't know, what might be a sensitive topic for different students. For us, the brave space is a space that's built on respect, and that, enables individuals to speak in draft,
Mm-hmm.
right? To reserve the right to change their mind as they grow and formulate, ideas that are shifting because they're growing, and but also a space that recognizes that we can create amazing, incredible art without depending on individuals' trauma. And so, you know, keeping that out of it, that kind of, you must, suffer and
Mm-hmm.
relive all of these past traumatic experiences just to tell the story of your character. No, you don't.
Yep.
And but the other thing really is to, because we're constantly asking students to do things that, you know are maybe unfamiliar or are outside of their kind of comfort zone in terms of what they're already good at, that, we're asking them to take risks,
Mm-hmm.
right? To take acceptable risks in an environment that will allow them to fail, that
Yep.
this is the place to figure out, right? But if you're always working just on the things that you're already good at, then you miss the opportunity to really discover what else you might be able to do. And part of that, I think it all comes down to respect,
Yep.
right? That, what happens in the classroom, you know, stays in the classroom, so that if someone takes a risk with a piece and maybe it doesn't materialize in the way that they hoped, they don't have to worry about, you know hearing other students gossiping about it down
Mm.
the hall, right? Or, that we don't tolerate that.
Yep.
And so, it's that sense of constantly, playing and pushing what you're already good at so
Yep.
that you can discover what else you can do.
I'm so glad I asked. I mean, we've had the conversation about brave spaces a couple times on the pod, especially with some of the artist guests, a
Mhm.
little less with the colleges. But I'm also glad that you talked about trauma, because you used that phrase trauma informed earlier,
Mhm.
which I'm not sure that people are going to be as familiar with it, even if
Yeah.
they've heard brave space. Do you mean that the faculty is trauma informed in terms of what do you mean in terms of how that informs your training? Is it just about, hey, you don't have to use your trauma the way acting has in the past? Certainly, even when I did it, it was like, we're going deep into
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
practice.
And well, there's two things. Also, I should say that we have a consent forward practice also. So students
So consent
learn
forward, trauma
boundary
informed.
practices, and they have self care cues, and that's built into what we're doing. But I think because it goes back to what we were saying earlier about process, right? When you have a process and a clear process that's repeatable and
Mhm.
reliable, then you know how to tell the story of a character without having to be coached through, I mean, just that stereotypical example of remembering, what happened when, I'm not even going to trauma dump by giving the example. But, you know, but I think what we're doing, because we're based in process, is investigating as a faculty, how can we help students
Yes.
achieve these goals without relying on their lived experience, because
Yes.
coaching alone really is often asking students to rely on their lived
Yep.
experience.
It's so well said, and I think it is a necessary place that the education sort of has to find. And I think
Mhm.
people realize, hey, we've gone too far in sort of, we have in the past in asking people for a certain level of trauma, and then I think also people have realized in some spaces the way that safety is achieved, if it means hands completely off and you're not helping the student move
Mhm.
forward in any way. I think sometimes students feel like, I want to be pushed too. Like I do want help at 18.
Well,
I'm
you can have
figuring it
both.
out.
I mean,
Yep.
I think what we're trying to, what I take a lot of pride in that we've moved beyond, is the kind of training that both David and I experience, which is like, you come into a space and it's like, just trust me,
Right.
do it, right? And that this like kind of blind faith in the instructor,
Yep.
that you're just going to step into it and who knows what can happen. And here's the thing, you can let an actor in training understand, it's not teaching by surprise. You can let them know what will happen without necessarily letting them know how, what the expected
Mm-hmm.
discovery is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big part of it,
Yep.
that we can say we're going to have an exploration now that's going to ask you to do this and this and this. Afterwards, we'll talk about what you
Yep.
discover, right?
Yep.
You don't need to provide all of the information, but there's a big difference between we're going to ask you to do this kind of thing,
Yep.
right? As opposed to just trust me, now do this. And then the student, you know, depending on their own lived experience, might never fully get what the instructor intends from that exercise because they're always worried about being off center and what may surprise them.
Yep.
You can say, we're going to do this and explore that. I'm going to ask you to stand opposite your partner and to approximate eye contact and allow yourself to be present. I may not say why we're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I may not say what I hope you're going to discover in doing that, but I can tell you what will happen so that you can be fully present without worrying about what might surprise you.
Yep. Well, it's so important both from a what is the best place to learn perspective, and I think schools are certainly wrestling with that, but then also in terms of if you graduate into the world and some rooms are not going to necessarily be run that way. It's like, do you have a process where you can take care of yourself? I remember being like learning, I'll use stage combat as an example because it's easy.
Mhm.
Learning that was so healthily and safely in school, and then walking into rooms where they're like, you can just take a slap, right? And you're like, oh, I guess, yeah, sure, of course, yeah, I can do that. Like, that's fine. Like, I wouldn't complain. The lead is trying to ask me to do this. Of
Mhm.
course, I'll say yeah. Those kind of things where you go, I was prepared enough for school to be safe, but was I prepared for the real world and what it was going to be
Right.
like? And of
Well,
course,
and
it goes beyond the
recognizing that
expectation.
everyone's, again, like what skills you bring into the space may not match that of the person you're working
Yep.
opposite. So how can we bring people, or at least give you the vocabulary to come into the same space and share that, that moment or experience so that everyone is cared for.
Yep. All right, I could do another 45 minutes on that, but I promise I'll let you guys go. We'll wrap with just you both are parents. I also am a parent of an
Yes.
almost 3-year-old. We love. Could we give some advice to the parents in this process? So, you mentioned parents in the ways they can ruin it for their kids. So feel free to expand on that if you want, David. But also, just in terms of many of our listeners are parents who are, especially early in the process, helping their child maybe explore their school lists right now. If they're at that phase of the process, some may be listening to this 9 months from now and they're helping them make the final decision. Sort of what advice would you have from having worked with parents through this process of how they can best support their child?
Wow. I'm going to go one step deeper than this.
Please go deeper. I
Uh,
consent.
your kids going into this business when they graduate from college, don't ask them what they're doing. Don't be bothering them. Just say, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to have a lot of pressure on them. And if you're sitting there pushing them to get a job right away, it's going to take time. Give them the space they need and just call them up and say, how are you? Don't define them as an actor and don't make everything about what they're getting because it's going to screw them up. Just
Mm-hmm.
support them. And it's the same thing with this process. They're going to, not every kid's going to get into Carnegie, Michigan, and whatever, and it's going to hurt them deeply. And there's kids too that are going to say, "Oh, I don't want to audition for that because it's going to hurt if
Mm-hmm.
I," and that's the wrong thing too, because this business hurts.
Mm-hmm.
You have got to be able to deal with rejection. If you can't deal with rejection, you shouldn't be in the business to begin with. The best thing that ever happened to me at Syracuse was I got one major role on the main stage. Every day I had to go up to that damn call board and hear people screaming as I looked and saw that I either got the soldier to the right or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that, me believing in myself and continuously stepping up as I got knocked down, was really what I think made me survive. When I
Mm-hmm.
graduated, Julia Murney and I were the only two I ever saw at auditions. Where was everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they couldn't deal with rejection. So what's going to happen is they're going to, hopefully your kid's going to audition for every school. Don't let them not audition for the top schools.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when they feel the rejection, just tell them, I still believe in you. I believe in you, and help them to find a school that fits them,
Mm-hmm.
that they really believe in the school. But yeah,
I love that.
that's my thing. You just got to support them, and don't get in their way at the audition. Don't talk to the professors unless they talk to you. And I will talk to you, just so you
Yeah.
know. I
Yeah.
like the parents, but that isn't with every other
Mm.
school. And don't be don't show that you're a show mom, even if you are a show mom, even if you love being a show mom, just or dad. Don't do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Valerie, anything you want to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I definitely do. I would say trust trust that your student will wind up someplace, right? I think that there can be a little bit of, and not just in our discipline, because I see it with, contemporaries of mine. There can be a little bit of hysteria about, getting into the
Wait,
right.
sorry, did you say a little bit of hysteria?
Yeah.
I didn't. I'm sorry. I must have misheard that part of it. I don't know if the mic cut out or something.
I think trust that your student will end up someplace,
Hmm.
right? And that it is not, nothing about this field is comes with a clear path, right? This is not like being an accountant. Right? It's not like you major in accounting and then you take the CPA and then you're an accountant. I'm
Hmm.
sure I'm oversimplifying it. I apologize to all the
Yeah,
accountants
are
listening.
many accountant listeners who are hour
Um,
into this podcast? Yeah, exactly.
but what I would say is this process really mirrors the process of the industry, of the constant, like, being able to dream big, to put yourself out there, but also to recognize that you have to be kind of auditioning the program as well.
Hmm.
Because to get into a huge program where maybe you do or maybe you don't feel, respected, or, things like that, the question is that where you want to be for 4 years,
Hmm.
right? If you feel, and I'm not, I'm just going off of things that we've heard other students say to us through their journey. But, if you feel constantly intimidated, right?
Hmm.
Is that an environment that you're really going to grow,
Hmm.
right? So to pay attention to what the entire thing is, right? Like, how people treat you in the space. Do you feel that you can take risks with those faculty? Do you feel that you're going to be pushed and can grow?
Hmm.
Do you feel when you meet the students that it's an environment that suits you or not? Because, it can be easy to get swept up in a lot of things that then when we have students who transfer, what we hear is that they didn't realize what they were really getting
Hmm.
into, or that
Hmm.
the program wasn't what they thought it was. And so, all of those kind of soft clues that
Yep.
you can figure out, that's the big thing. My other piece of advice is, trust that your student, your child, is capable of doing their own communication and outreach.
Mm.
Mm.
And what I would say is it's challenging. I know firsthand it can be challenging. And it's okay if you want to uh, coach them through those emails and sit down with your child and write the emails to the faculty with them. But one thing I would say is we get a lot of emails directly from parents, and that's, we love parents. But what I would suggest maybe is, how can you help your student be independent
Yeah.
and take charge and command of their own experience? So, because next year, right, in the fall,
They're not
you're not
taking
going to
class with
be
you.
there to
Yeah.
do that. And it can be shocking for the student later if they don't have those baby steps
Yeah.
where they're able to communicate and advocate for themselves and all of that. And it absolutely comes from the love that you have for your student and your child.
Yeah.
And, and we understand that. And this isn't like a slap on the hand kind of
Yeah.
thing, but just maybe think, you know, is there a way that you can help your student be independent as they advocate for
And
themselves?
is it more of you sniffing out, oh, I noticed this is from a parent's name, email address, or just that you see a formality in the email replies that make you feel, hey, this doesn't feel like it's written by an 18-year-old?
Oh, no, I mean that parents email us directly
That it is
asking
Melanie and
questions that
not
students
David who's
have
sending the thing.
asked.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, that was such great advice. Thank you both for the time. If people want even more information on LIU Post, is there a place that you'd want to send them? Do you have social medias that you prefer? Do you have website? Where's the best place for people to get more information?
Yeah, on Instagram, they can follow at LIU Post Theater.
It says very questioningly, but we'll put it in the show notes confidently so they'll have it
Put it in the
correctly.
show notes. No, it's
Yeah.
at LIU Post Theater.
Yep.
And we have a great new website that actually was designed by one of our students
Hey.
called Post. It's www.posttheatercompany.org. And that will give you more information than the university website.
Yep.
So we ask students to check that out. But we love our Instagram because the students primarily run that account. And so there are student takeovers, and it really gives you a sense to see kind of a day in the life of what it's like to be a student here.
We know that you didn't design the website, given that you read the www into the thing. That's not.
Yeah, I
really.
wasn't going to, but then I did at posttheatercompany.org.
There it is. Oh, that sounded so cool. No, that sounded better. Now it's 20 years younger you sounded. Posttheatercompany.org is fantastic.
I don't know why I did that. I've never done that before. I just got awkward and weird.
No, I intimidated. I added a little. I gave an intimidating glare. That was on me. I'll take that one. David, Valerie, this was so fun. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. What lovely humans. I very much enjoyed getting to know both Valerie and David a bit more in this conversation. Lots of great takeaways I could be choosing here. I could do another 20 minutes on brave spaces, of course, and all the shifting environments of rehearsal rooms and educational spaces and all the complexities there. I also do think there's a great conversation, maybe we'll have that later, about how to handle yourself outside the audition room, as David mentions. Definitely important to be conscious of yourself there, both students and parents. But I have too much to say in terms of that broader and more topical takeaway post-University of the Arts. So I'm going to start there. And again, I said this at the beginning, this is not a takeaway about LIU Post at all. It just happens to be on this episode that this all happened. So that's why I'm starting here with this takeaway. We've made this analogy before, but with all the myriad sports analogies we've made on the podcast, I do think it's helpful to make, again, this stocks analogy when talking about these college programs. Or if you're not familiar with stocks, you can really just think about any kind of large investment, any large financial investment you make, right? Of course, this is literally true in terms of the financial investment you would be making, you're often making in college, whether that's something you've been saving up for many years, whether you're going to acquire loans to pay for it. But also in terms of your time and these pivotal 4 years of your life, you are investing in a school and saying, yes, you are the right place for me to learn. You are the right place for me to launch my career. And we all know all the ways in which that kind of carries forward beyond the education itself. Not only are some of my classmates my dearest friends, some of whom spoke at my wedding, but I still wear a ratty t-shirt with Carnegie Mellon on it, to the gym just yesterday. So sadly, many years later, that's something that carries through in many ways, just where we end up going to school. And I've often made this stock analogy before when talking specifically about emerging programs and talking about the investment you're making. Often we'll talk about it with like a specific director of the program. You're kind of hoping and betting that the director is going to keep growing that program the way that they've been doing it, right? It's kind of like if you're doing the stock, it's really like believing in a certain product or really believing in the CEO of a company. And you're saying that you believe, in this case, this college has legs and will continue to grow. And that's relevant because it's not just about the 4 years you're at school, but to some extent about the continued reputation beyond the fact, right? I've often used the examples of former podcast guests like Victoria Bussert or Caitlin Hopkins, who in the time I've been coaching have led emerging programs to become notable, renowned options in the college landscape. And if you're one of the early investors in that program, you benefited not only from the excellent training you got, but from that continued excellent reputation of the program. And I think it's worth talking a little bit now about the flip side and what we're seeing with what happens with U Arts there. And to be clear, this is truly not a comment, again, in relation to LIU Post at all. It's really only I'm making this takeaway because of the timing of this happening. But if a program were to fall off for whatever reason, whether that's financial, artistic, whether there was some kind of scandal, et cetera, these are all examples we've seen over the years where a program has maybe dipped because of one of these things, you do ride that stock down to some extent in the way you might ride a stock up if it continues to emerge. Now, I don't think it's quite as direct a correlation as the stock analogy where you're making specific money off it, especially when we're talking about years after school, right? That's not as direct a correlation. But for those latter examples, if you happen to be in a program when that shift happens, it can be really unsettling. If you chose a school for that specific program director and then that person retires or accepts another job opportunity, you're left with the risk and the hope that the program continues in the direction that you originally thought it would, which is why often we talk to our students about programs, we hope that you believe in the school's mission and direction more than just one single person's version of that direction, or that investment can become a really risky one. And this is where David's comments about certain, he calls quote unquote top programs, which again, we try to avoid words like top because I don't think we want to think of theater education as some sort of hierarchical, these are the top ones, these are the bottom ones. That's, just not the language that we use, but certainly we understand what David's saying. A version of what he's saying is that these are safer investments. No stock is ever guaranteed, but if you're buying Apple or Google or name whatever established company with years of performance, you're giving yourself a greater chance of that school still being in good standing 20 years from now than if you were going to buy a meme stock or even a really high, exciting, big performing stock that's just a newer stock, right? If you buy Nvidia right now, which is like the big hot stock on the on the market, it really would feel like a gamble to me, right? It could pay off really well or it could dip a lot, right? Certainly if you bought it a year or 2 years ago, you're feeling really happy with your investment, right? And I think you could say the same about something like Bitcoin, right? Are you certain that there's a there with your investment? Is there something preventing it from dropping significantly or potentially dropping to nothing? And I think it's worth thinking, how risk averse do you want to be with your investment versus kind of maximizing your upside? These are all fair questions. I don't think there's one way to approach it. But in general, with something like 4 years of your life, I tend to be a little bit more risk averse with it as opposed to, taking a big gamble. Now, the other part of the stock discussion, which we've had in many cases, is what price are you getting, right? You're paying a lot for that Apple stock, and you could make the argument that you could get just as high quality an education specifically at a different school for a fraction of the price. I think that that's a reasonable argument, though again, you're not going to have Apple's surety of value in the way that you would at a school that's been around for 100 years. And the new part to throw into this conversation, in the lessons of UArts and Marymount most recently being the public versions of this, but certainly not the only institution that's had financial problems, is that part of evaluating your stock portfolio would be about doing your due diligence and looking into the financials, right? Ask those probing questions. You can ask schools to show me the Carfax, as they say, and certainly research these questions independently as well. That's not to say that every school that goes through financial problems will fold or have the worst result possible. We've certainly seen that not happen in the past, but it is good information for you to have at your fingertips as you're assessing risk with your investment. And I'll also say it's something that I'm going to add into my questions as I'm interviewing schools moving forward, right? We are recorded ahead, just so you know, with a few college episodes. So for the next couple, it's not going to be any different because these were recorded before this happened. But for my future interviews, I'm going to ask schools about their financial realities and what assurances students can have of stability moving forward. So that's one small lesson that I'm trying to take away from all this, to have more awareness and alertness to that specific risk so we can be as informed as possible throughout this process. But also, I do think it's worth saying, this isn't something I think students should have expected or could have even anticipated. Even if they knew those exact financial details in advance, could they have anticipated this result? Again, there have been schools with financial issues that had very different eventualities. And we don't even know exactly what the eventuality of UArts is going to be to this day as I record this on June 11th, right? And that stock analogy really carries forward here too, which is that even if people are really informed, they can't predict the future. Just listen to economists try to tell you what will happen, and boy, you will think that experts have no idea what they're talking about. And I do say that as someone who calls himself an expert in this process. But there you go. That feels a little bit odd. So a bit of grace for yourself if you're someone who was personally affected here and you think, I should have known. I don't know that that's the case that you should have known. And I guess a bit of grace for all of us in all things is not the worst thing. Well, there you have it. Another episode of Mapping the College Edition, produced by Meghan Cordier and Kelly Prendergast. Follow us at Mapping the College Edition on Instagram. Check us out at mtca.com for more information about how MTCA can help you with your individual college prep. And of course, rate and review us at your podcast platform of choice. I almost did an entire episode without asking you for a rating and review. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, how many musicals can you think of that are also places? I got Chicago, Oklahoma, South Pacific, New York, How to Dance in Ohio. What else you got? We'll see you next week.